Why Machiavelli still shakes the world. When people hear the name Niccolo Machiavelli, they usually think of scheming villains and ruthless dictators. His most famous work, The Prince, has been called dangerous, manipulative, even evil. For centuries, it's carried the reputation of being a handbook for tyranny. But here's the twist. The reason Machiavelli still shakes the world isn't because he encouraged cruelty for its own sake. It's because he ripped the mask off power and showed it for what it really is. His insights have outlived kings, empires, and centuries because they reach far beyond politics. You'll find traces of his ideas in modern leadership, corporate boardrooms, global diplomacy, and even everyday relationships. And here's the part most people miss. The Prince isn't about celebrating manipulation. It's about survival. It's about the hard truth that power is fragile. Perception matters more than good intentions, and control can slip through your fingers if you don't understand the forces at play. Who was Machiavelli, really? Before we dive into his ideas, let's get to know the man himself. Niccolo Machiavelli wasn't born into power. He wasn't a king or a nobleman. He was a diplomat in Renaissance Italy, a time when the country wasn't one unified nation but a collection of city-states constantly fighting, betraying, and overthrowing each other. Florence, Milan, Venice, Rome, each had its own leaders, armies, and ambitions. One day you might have a powerful ally. The next, that same ally might sell you out to your enemies. Machiavelli served as a top official in Florence, working closely with rulers, military leaders, and foreign dignitaries. He saw firsthand how fragile power really was. He watched bold leaders rise and fall overnight, often because they were too idealistic or too cruel and didn't know how to balance the two. When Florence changed hands and he lost his position, Machiavelli was exiled. Out of power, stripped of influence, he wrote The Prince. Not as a fantasy, but as a brutally honest reflection of what he'd seen behind the curtains of politics. That's why his work still resonates today. It wasn't theory. It was reality. Secret lesson behind the myth. When people hear the term Machiavellian, they often picture a scheming mastermind, someone willing to betray, manipulate, or even destroy to stay in power. Over time, Machiavelli's name became shorthand for political cunning and ruthless ambition. But here's the truth. The Prince wasn't written as a celebration of cruelty. It was a warning. Machiavelli saw that leaders who clung to idealism, who tried to rule only through kindness, fairness, or popularity, often failed. They were crushed by enemies who didn't play by the same rules. The real lesson? Power is messy. Sometimes to protect your people or your position, you have to make decisions that aren't pretty. That doesn't mean being reckless or cruel for no reason. It means being smart, strategic, and willing to act when others hesitate. This is where his most famous line comes in. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. People interpret this as a call for tyranny, but Machiavelli didn't mean be a monster. He meant that fear brings stability when love alone can't protect you. Love is fickle. It can vanish the moment things go wrong. But respect, the kind that keeps people from crossing you, can hold a kingdom together. And that's the part most people miss. Machiavelli wasn't creating villains. He was preparing leaders for the real world. Power is about perception, not just force. Machiavelli understood something that many leaders still miss today. Power isn't just about strength, armies, or money. It's about perception. He argued that a ruler must appear virtuous, even if reality behind the scenes is more complicated. Why? Because people judge what they see, not what they can't. A leader who looks confident, moral, and decisive will hold on to power far longer than one who lets their mistakes, doubts, or weaknesses show too openly. This is where his metaphor of the lion and the fox comes in. The lion represents strength, bravery, force, the ability to defend against enemies. The fox represents cunning, intelligence, strategy, and the ability to outsmart rivals. A leader who's only a lion is easy to trap. A leader who's only a fox lacks the strength to defend themselves. Machiavelli said a truly powerful ruler must be both, and this isn't just about medieval kings. Think about politicians today, CEOs, influencers, even managers at work. Their success often depends as much on public image as on actual ability. They curate appearances, craft narratives, and project confidence, even when things are messy behind the scenes. Machiavelli saw this truth centuries ago. Power survives on perception, the dark side of idealism. Machiavelli had watched enough leaders rise and fall to spot a pattern. The ones who ruled with nothing but kindness or high ideals often didn't last. Why? Because they assumed the world would play fair if they did. It never did. Idealistic rulers trusted too easily, hesitated when they needed to act, or refused to make tough decisions because they didn't want to seem harsh. Their enemies, meanwhile, had no such hesitation. They betrayed alliances, spread rumors, and grabbed power while the so-called good rulers stood frozen, waiting for everyone else to be reasonable. Machiavelli believed this was dangerous. He warned that a leader who relies only on morality will be destroyed by those who don't. That doesn't mean leaders should abandon ethics altogether. But he argued that in moments of crisis, survival sometimes requires decisions that aren't purely good in the traditional sense. History is full of examples. Kings toppled by revolutions, presidents voted out after showing weakness, CEOs losing companies because they avoided unpopular decisions. Machiavelli would have said the same thing about all of them. Fortune favors the decisive, not the naive. Lessons for today's world. Machiavelli wrote The Prince 500 years ago, but his ideas echo everywhere today. Politics, business, even everyday life, they all run on the same truth. Power isn't just about who's right. It's about who's smart, strategic, and willing to make hard calls. In politics, leaders craft images carefully. They smile for cameras, shake hands with rivals, and talk about unity even when they're playing hardball behind the scenes. Machiavelli would nod knowingly. He understood that appearances keep order while the real work often happens in private. In business, CEOs and entrepreneurs face the same dilemma. Do you lay off workers to save the company? Do you pivot strategies even if people don't like it? Sometimes, success means making decisions that feel cold in the moment, but protect the bigger picture. Machiavelli wouldn't call that cruelty. He'd call it survival. And in personal life, his lessons show up in subtle ways. Setting boundaries, standing firm when people try to take advantage, knowing when to speak and when to stay quiet. That's all part of navigating power dynamics. Machiavelli believed understanding people, their ambitions, fears, and motives was as important as understanding laws or armies. At its core, his advice wasn't be ruthless. It was know the game you're playing and don't pretend the rules are kinder than they are. Ethical dilemma. Machiavelli's ideas raise a question that has troubled leaders for centuries. Can power and morality truly coexist? He didn't say leaders should abandon ethics completely, but he was painfully honest about the world. People betray, enemies lie, and fate turns suddenly. He believed that a ruler who clings to morality when survival demands tough choices risks losing everything, including the chance to do any good at all. This is where the ethical dilemma comes in. If you bend the rules to protect your people, are you a tyrant or a realist? If you stay pure and lose power, leaving chaos behind, have you really done the right thing? Machiavelli never offered easy answers. He simply argued that weakness invites disaster. Leaders must balance morality with pragmatism, idealism with reality. The danger comes when one side completely overwhelms the other, when power is used without limits, or when idealism blinds a leader to real threats. It's a line every leader walks, doing what's necessary without losing your soul in the process. Conclusion: why the warning still matters. 5 centuries after The Prince was written, the world has changed, but not as much as we like to think. Power is still fragile. Leaders still fall because they misjudge perception, hesitate when decisiveness is needed, or trust that good intentions alone will keep them safe. Machiavelli's warning remains uncomfortable because it forces us to see the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. He didn't write for villains. He wrote for leaders who wanted to survive storms, protect their people, and hold on to power long enough to make a difference. The real lesson: power is never permanent. It demands courage, strategy, and an understanding of human nature. Machiavelli simply refused to dress this truth up in pretty words. That's why his ideas still sting today, and why they're still worth hearing. Because whether you're running a country, a business, or just trying to stay afloat in a messy world, one fact hasn't changed. If you don't understand power, you'll be crushed by those who do.